Hello, and welcome to another edition of Day Drinking with Kevin. I'm your host, Kevin McGuire. And today we're going to start a special series called Perspectives, where I'll be talking with masters of wine and master sommeliers about their personal journeys that led them to the summit of our industry's profession. We start today with Lisa Granik. She's a master of wine from 2006, and she has a very interesting story to tell. I can't wait to hear what she has to say. So, Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It is an honor to speak with you. In all the years that I've been studying wine, I've been fortunate to meet a number of people that have reached the highest levels of attainment in our industry, of which you are a master of wine as of 2006, I believe.
Correct, yes.
And I have met some people that have some amazing stories, but when I read yours, I'm sorry, I think it's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. Georgetown Law, Moscow State University, Yale Law, Fulbright Scholar. Help me understand how someone with a legal background ended up in the wine industry.
Well, you mentioned Georgetown. So at Georgetown, I was in the School of Foreign Service.
Okay.
And in many ways, we were taught to be citizens of the world.
Mhm.
And, some people would call us rootless cosmopolitans, but I'm grounded in America. But I certainly do see myself as a citizen of the world. And when I decided that I no longer wanted to be a practicing lawyer, and I thought about what I might do, it took some time. Wine didn't just jump out of the box and say, hello, choose me. But once it came to mind, and I realized the degree to which it brought together so many of my interests, one in that there's always more to learn. There are always more questions that you're going to find that you need to ask. I'm able to use the languages that I speak. I'm able to travel and spend time. I'm not somebody who likes to go and look at buildings and in a week and turn around and come home. I like to get into a culture. And so wine was a way of connecting and bringing people together that appealed to many aspects of my different interests.
How were you able to use that love of learning from your law degrees to apply that to studying about wine?
Well, actually, even within the MW, they say when you taste blind, you think like a detective and you write like a lawyer, because in reality, it's about logical reasoning. And you're not guessing what the wine is, at least in the MW program. You have to look at the evidence in front of you, and then you rule in, rule out what this may or may not be, and logically come to a conclusion. So to the degree that also as an MW, a lot of what I do is communication, a law degree does nurture one's communication skills, whether it's in logical writing or in logical speaking.
I read an article that was written about you recently, and you said that passing the MW was harder than passing the bar exam.
Oh, absolutely. It took many more years. It was much more difficult. And yeah, and there's no prep course for it really, but you're all alone there in that exam, and there's no multiple choice. It challenged, there were different skill sets in tasting and in writing in a certain style that I did not grow up with, because it's very much based on, in some ways, British essay style. And so learning about that and getting used to that and internalizing that was challenging. The only thing that was as difficult as the MW was learning to speak Russian.
I bet. There's no question that 2020 was hard on a lot of ways. Internationally, we had a global pandemic, but within the wine industry itself, a lot of restaurants closed. People in our industry suffered, lost their jobs.
Tremendously.
How do you see our industry coming out of this pandemic and hopefully being stronger as a result of where we are right now?
Well, I have no crystal ball, and I think it's going to be some time before the restaurant industry comes back, just because of people being, actually, many people have less money to spend, okay? and whether they're going to necessarily go back and want to go out to eat or spend their disposable income there is a question. On the other hand, we're social creatures, and for those of us in the wine industry, and we're a fraction, we thrive on getting together and sharing wine with people. And so that slowly is going to come back. At the same time, I think the average person also is lonely and is craving connection. And whether people go back into restaurants is another question. I think, but I think there's a possibility of encouraging people to explore wine even when they get together at home, because that was something that took off during the pandemic. One of the challenges was that people began to, while they explored more kinds of wines, which is fantastic, often they were looking for less expensive wines. And I think there's going to be a bit of a readjustment in terms of pricing, what people are willing to pay, as well as, and how they're willing to experiment. I mean, I think some of the more sophisticated prognosticators have said that fine imported wines are likely to decline in this country, largely because there's a greater demand for these wines outside of the United States, which is terrible for those of us who like to drink, fine imported wine. But, I look, it's important to be creative. Lots of people in the wine industry did not start in the wine industry. They started from other, they were artists, they were theater people. And I'm sure that there are people who are going to take this time as an opportunity to think outside the box and come up with arguably more democratic ways, certainly more inclusive. I mean, one of the other things, as bad as the pandemic year was, we're seeing this move, and I don't think this is a blip, moving towards greater diversity. And with more people of different stripes in the wine industry, I always say, wine is vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, and lots of different colors and flavors. And what I like, I'm a chocolate person, but I respect people who like vanilla. Mm-hmm. And hopefully a greater diversity of people will all lap up different styles of wine, which will make the wine industry much more interesting rather than all of us drinking the same old thing all the time.
Fantastic. I am in the process right now of taking an online class at UC Davis in enology. And one of the things that I'm learning about is how to break into different markets and things. And I understand that that's something that you specialize in, is helping people in overseas markets to break into the US market and other things. Has that changed as a result of the pandemic and some of the trade wars and things that are going on, or is there still opportunities for people that want to come into our market?
There are absolutely opportunities. Part of the issue is that the current model is largely based on what the American market was 50 years ago, mm-hmm. where there wasn't that much imported wine. There was some Bordeaux, there was Burgundy, Liebfraumilch, right? Mm-hmm. And Chile was just becoming, into the market. And if you worked for an importer distributor and a supplier, a producer, paid a visit and said, would you import my wine? You would taste the wine and it was halfway decent and you didn't have competition in your portfolio. You'd say, sure, I'll give it a try and see what happens. Well, there's been such a flood of wine from all over the world. I mean, I was just looking, there are, in terms of just countries, in New York State alone, there are wines from well over 100 different countries. Okay. Wow. And so the level of competition is so very, very high. And you can't just rely, if you want to break into the American market, most producers think, oh, I'm going to meet an importer and then I don't have to do anything. Or all I have to do is get an importer and well, try getting a meeting with an importer, right? Try getting their attention. This is almost impossible. And producers still think they have to meet, all they need is an importer and their job is done. And they don't understand that how they need, even if they're going to get a meeting with an importer, or a distributor, how they need to prepare for that. And because, it's still very much, this is my property, it's my baby, and I've defined what it is. and it's producer driven rather than consumer driven. And they're not really thinking about how to target the market. That was the way it was 40, 50 years ago. It's not that way now. But if there are still areas where if you have the right package, the right message, there are ways to improve whether to get into the market or to improve your sales in the United States. But it doesn't come from just meeting somebody and shaking hands and saying yes and going home.
I know my customers are constantly challenging for new grapes, unique wines, unique locations with a story. And I know that one of the places that you specialize in is Georgian wines. And I get a lot of questions about them all the time. What makes the wines from Georgia so unique and so wonderful that people are actively searching for them now?
Well, Georgia as a country really, it's a very poor country with no other major industry. I mean, it's not like Italy where they have rice and pasta and automobiles and so forth, right? It's an agricultural country. And the government decided, roughly 10 years ago, that they were going to promote the wine, the Georgian wine industry in discrete markets. So there's been a very strong PR push, overwhelmingly since let's say 2014. And so there's been increased buzz, bringing sommeliers, and I have been part of that off and on, bringing sommeliers and journalists and other people to come to Georgia and write about it. It is a very different country in terms of its culture. So it is unique. The fact that it has an unbroken tradition of winemaking for 8,000 years is something that basically nobody else can talk about or boast of. Where wine began is lots of places are trying to say that they invented wine. I'm not going to go into that. But Georgia has at least 8,000 years of winemaking history. And they have they have their own grape varieties. So, and these, while some of them are grown in New York State or California and Australia, they all came from Georgia. And so there's been a story that, you say people want a story. There is a story of this history. There's a story, just as people were getting interested in something other than oak barrels and stainless steel tanks. They discovered the kvevari, the clay vessel, whether it's a tinaja in Spain, an amphora in Italy, that suddenly a lot of things converged. And Georgia is on the other end, seems at the other end of the world. It certainly seems exotic. And people hear this birthplace of wine. They can't pronounce the grapes, but it strikes this chord of, man, what is this? I'm curious, which is great if people are curious.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the delicious orange wines anymore. It's about the wide range of products that they have to offer as well.
Well, yeah, also because in the past, I would say 3 or 4 years, you find more people, winemakers, I mean, mostly young, they're all young, mostly young winemakers who are saying, I don't care about 8,000 years of history. Not really. But I don't care about what the tradition was in some ways in my village. I've heard about, yes, I was told I had to have 6 months of skin contact, but I'm not sure everybody likes that. I'm going to experiment and make pet nets. Excuse me. I'm going to experiment and make something else. And so there is actually a greater diversity that we're seeing among Georgian wines from their classic varieties. And I think we're going to see both more of that experimentation, as well as, because there was, after phylloxera hit Georgia and the Soviets rebuilt the vineyards, they limited the plantings to basically about 40 grape varieties out of the 500 odd. And more people are now, the government is also supporting a more diverse grape variety, field of grape varieties. And so we're going to see more grape varieties coming from Georgia in the next 10 years. And that'll be very interesting.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it myself. I love Georgian wines. What was that moment that put you over the edge when it comes to going down that wine path, whether that be that special bottle or that special wine trip, or what was that point in time where you said, yes, this is the career that I would like to follow?
Wow. I don't know if I can pinpoint it, because actually when I started, I still had one leg in academia. And So I was doing both things at once.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say it probably was my first wine trip.
Okay.
Where I went to Italy, and people spoke to me of their heritage and why their patrimony and why they felt so strongly about producing wines in a certain style from this place. And then they looked to me to say, how can we rely? We need you. How can you translate all of this and our wines into your market? And I realized that I had a role that was different from being a lawyer. In a lawyer, you're always arguing with people in many ways. People are never happy to go to their lawyer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people are happy when they're around wine. And I began to see that this was something that, as I said earlier, it was true. It captured many of my intellectual interests, but in terms of my personality, I would rather encourage people and educate people and encourage, expand someone's curiosity. And wine offered me the opportunity to do that. And at the same time, because I had as a lawyer, I also did a lot of social justice work. I firmly believe that a lot of these traditions and some of these small family farms are imperiled. And if we can, in a little way, I am helping and these old traditions remain relevant and alive in the modern world. And I think it makes life more interesting for all of us.
I think I've heard that special moment start in Italy from so many people.
Really?
I mean, you can't sit down and tie your shoes in Italy without somebody putting a glass of wine and a plate of food in front of you. And
well, I'll tell you, I had a moment where I was in Italy, and I woke up one morning, and I had been spending so much time in the Soviet Union, and I woke up, and I was in Tuscany, and it was beautiful. And I thought about what my life had been up until that point, and I thought, I'm in a foreign country, check. I'm speaking a foreign language, which I love to do, check, right? And then I thought, and the people are wonderful, right? The food's amazing, and the wine's incredible. And I said, Lisa, what were you doing all these years? And I haven't been back to those other places, haven't been back to Moscow since, though it has changed.
I absolutely get the sense of your passion and enthusiasm for wine, but I can see how you can use your experience as an educator, because wine is all about education, and even your experience as a lawyer in helping to negotiate, inroads into different markets and things like that. Now that we're talking, I can see exactly why you ended up where you are today and why you're as successful as you are at what you do. I think another question I'd like to ask is if there are people out there, and I have viewers that are just getting into the wine industry, are established wine professionals that are looking to move their way up. Can you give them any encouragement as to what it's going to take for them to achieve the highest levels of attainment, like you have?
A lot of hard work.
Sure.
A lot of focus, a lot of discipline. That's a lot of you have to be tenacious, and you have to know you have a goal, and I think you need to know why that goal is important to you, because often there are times where you wake up and you'll say, why am I doing this? This is really hard. But if you have that end point there, you'll dig deep and find the inspiration and the drive within to achieve it, because it's hard work. There's a lot of fun, but it's hard work, and the competition is far greater, as whether it's in selling wine there's so many more people who want to be in the wine industry. And so I think it's important you have to work very hard. And I would encourage people to not try to be like everybody else.
I think you've developed a very unique path. And so not everybody has to work at a restaurant. Nobody, people don't necessarily have to be wine writers or wine educators. There's room for all kinds of people in the wine industry. And when it comes down to it, it's history and it's food and it's people and all the things that I can tell you love, and I love those as well.
Yeah, I mean, the best part about it is, look, it's wonderful to drink a great bottle of wine, but it's really no fun to drink a great bottle of wine alone. The wine industry is all about relationships. That's how business is done. And the best bottles of wine are shared. I mean, the hardest thing for me, hard is relative, but one of the sad points, poignant moments for me often during the pandemic was when I would go down to my cellar and I'd be pulling all these bottles of wine that were ready to drink, and I didn't have anybody to drink them with. And I just thought, I kept putting them back. No, I'm waiting for this person. No, I'm waiting for that person. And, so the opportunity to do that, that's what I'm looking forward to the most is when this is over, is being able to share, and share experiences and share feelings and live and grow with other people.
I agree. For me, every one of the bottles in my cellar represents an opportunity to spend time with friends. It represents an opportunity to relive an experience of where I obtained that bottle from.
Mm-hmm.
And I had somebody the other day tell me that they actually survived the pandemic by going into their cellar and looking at the bottles and then in their head reliving the trip that they took to get that bottle, or reliving the dinner that bottle represented and things, because you couldn't go out, you couldn't travel, you couldn't do those things. And I thought about it, I was like, wow, each one of these bottles does represent something to that. And just like you said, they all represent, oh, I want to have that bottle with this group of friends, or I want to experience this with that group of friends. Or now, the one thing you didn't say about all the things to prepare for becoming an MW is note cards. I don't know how many note cards you have. I must have like 12,000 of them or something like that. Do you still use note cards, or do you have other systems?
I don't have note cards now. I used note cards, I think, through the diploma.
Uh-huh.
But the MW is less about, there's people are saying in the wine business, oh, it's all about education. It's all about always learning, always more knowledge. There's something that distinguishes the MW. And this comes from, what I'm saying now comes from my colleague, Mark DeVere, Master of Wine. That when the knowledge, the MW is a bit of a pyramid. And the base of that pyramid is knowledge. And the note cards and all the information and all of the, knowing the AOCs and all of the great varieties and Chateauneuf and all these things you can memorize or look up. That's all there, right? And yes, we all have a tremendous body of information. But then do you understand that information, right? What's the level, in other words, you have all these facts, but what do they mean? What's their relevance? Mm-hmm. And then when you understand them, if I'm going to get all of this right, can you explain them with clarity? Okay. Why certain things came about, why there were only five major grape varieties in Bordeaux, for example, or why regulations were one way and there are no regulations elsewhere. The why and the so what is very important. And then there's the questions, and you have to be able to explain that with clarity. Then for the MW, you end up, it's a global exam, and there are issues that go across geographies, go across cultures, go across whether you're talking about large company or different kinds of businesses, and you have to compare and contrast practices and laws across on various different levels, and you have to be able to move things around in your head. And then ultimately, when you're able to articulate all of that with a great degree of facility, that level of reasoning and analysis and articulation is what we call mastery. And so you're not going to get that with note cards, right? The note cards are the base. And so ultimately now I find that I have a much broader, I won't say a spreadsheet, but it's more of a thought pattern of how things interrelate, certain elements that I pull together in order, and some call it a mind map, whatever it might be, to be able to look at a topic and see how things come together, how you manipulate them and how you talk about them.
Lisa, what's next for you? What are you working on now? Where do you see yourself moving forward? do you have any projects that you're working on or things that are coming up?
Well, I wrote my book on Georgian wine, and I actually was starting the second edition when the pandemic hit. So I'm itching to get back there because there are some other regions that haven't been discussed in great detail that I want to pursue. That's number one. And then also, the other thing that I have been working on is writing an annual guide to Georgian wine with blind tasted wines. Well, that's had a problem. That book has just come out a couple of weeks ago in Europe. Will find its way here eventually, but I don't know when I'm going to be able to get to Georgia to do the next with a panel to do the next volume. So some of these things are on hold. So in the interim, I have been tasting Georgian wines that are available in this market. I've been contacting the importers, and they've been sending me wines that I've put up on my blog, granickmw.com, so that people can see, what's out there, what I think of them, how they evolve, and so forth. And then I'm continuing to work with clients that are trying to figure out what to do in the American market, how things are changing, and what opportunities are like for them. So those are some of the things that I'm working on.
Fantastic. And I will absolutely put your website up at the bottom of the video here so that people can go and read your blog on Georgian wines and hopefully increase their knowledge base of different wines. And I think that's a unique one that not a lot of people have an immense amount of knowledge of.
Yeah, I will say I also was sent, I did a seminar on Georgian and Armenian wines a number of months ago. And so I actually tasted a whole slew of Armenian wines, which also are different and superb, very different philosophy than operating in Georgia. But there are notes on Armenia and then other wines as well.
Fantastic.
Great.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for
taking time
to speak with me today. I wish you all the best in all of your future endeavors with your second book on Georgian wines and everything that you're doing to help new wines arrive in this market. We call it Day Drinking with Kevin, so I will cheers you here.
I've just got some tonic water. That's it.
But thank you very, very much for your time. And hopefully when this pandemic is over, we can lift a glass together and
I hope so.
Celebrate all of the wonderful things that are the world of wine.
Okay. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Stay well. Cheers.
Lisa, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Your energy and enthusiasm and passion for wine, I know is going to inspire some of those day drinkers out there to start pursuing certifications. If you like this episode, please don't hesitate to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Day Drinking with Kevin. And if you have ideas for future episodes, please email me at daydrinkingwithkevin@gmail.com. Thanks again, Lisa, for your time. And until next time, I say, salute.